I have to tell you, I am enjoying this presidential campaign season because this is the first presidential race since the year 2000 that I have not been under indictment. I was held under indictment from March of 2004 until January 15th, 2009, 5 days before President Obama was inaugurated. And from the time of my release from Carswell Prison right up until the election, they fought to get me back in prison. I'll tell you tonight how they pulled every dirty trick in the book. I was even forced to appear in court without an attorney present, fighting against the U.S. attorneys to stop a bail revocation. It was the only day that my attorney could not appear in court, and he said he protested vigorously. He was a very effective counsel, but we had, this is about as dirty a case as you will ever hear. And I'll tell you about it tonight. I guess you could call this the secret confessions of a 9/11 whistleblower, but in fact, every American activist and intellectual, whatever your political stripe, it doesn't matter anymore. The Patriot Act has expanded the definition of sedition to say that you don't have to be engaged in violent activities. You don't have to be thinking violent thoughts. You don't have to speak violent words. If your actions, your ideas pose a challenge to the powers that be who are in control of the government, and a Congress member, your local Congress member might lose office. He might lose that election because you're too good at what you're doing. You are now subject to this. And you think I'm kidding, and I am not kidding you. I only wish that I was. It's worth noting as we start this that I was the second non-Arab American indicted on the Patriot Act after Jose Padilla. While I was under indictment, however, the Maryland State Police, where I live to this day, used the Patriot Act to go after the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, which supports wind power, recycling, solar energy. They went after the PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They went after the DC Anti-War Network, claiming that they were white supremacists because it just happened that they were a bunch of white college kids. So they were labeled, because it just happened to be a group of college kids, they were labeled as a potential white supremacist group. I mean, crazy. Amnesty International was targeted on the Patriot Act because they said they might be guilty of civil rights violations. Amnesty International might be guilty of espousing civil rights violations. Okay. It's craziness. I will tell you that on the morning of my arrest, the dogs never barked at my house. I have little dachshunds who are very yappy, and the feds snuck up on us so quietly, so stealthily. We were minding our own business. I was getting up to make coffee, and I had never broken the law in my life, and to this day, I don't believe I ever have. I have had differences with our government, but I had worked in anti-terrorism for a decade. I thought of myself, and I realize that a lot of people here don't like the CIA, and you probably don't like the kinds of things. I've never done rendition or any kind of waterboarding or anything like that, but I realize you guys don't like the CIA. I get that. But I had always been thought of myself as one of the good guys, okay? I gave advance warning about the '93 World Trade Center attack, advance warning about the bombing of the USS Cole. I did the Lockerbie negotiations with Libya. I did the weapons inspections talks with Iraq. I did one of the first investigations of Osama bin Laden before the Dar es Salaam Nairobi bombings. My bona fides in anti-terrorism were superior. And we knew, my CIA handler, Dr. Richard Fuse, had been in Lebanon during the 1980s, and he was involved in the hostage rescue of Terry Anderson and Terry Waite, and he had infiltrated Hezbollah and the heroin trafficking out of the Bekaa Valley, which was financing the hostages crisis and causing all these problems. My other defense intelligence handler had outed Oliver North. He was not with Oliver North, he exposed Oliver North. And he worked on the Project for Military Procurement, which exposed the $10,000 toilet seats and the $5,000 screws. So we had a history. There is a tradition in the intelligence community that you defend America, you're supposed to defend America. And it's supposed to be a patriotic thing to protect the community from this sort of corruption. And that's always what we were raised to believe. And so when I gave advance warning about 9/11, and the people of America wanted to hear the truth, I thought you actually might have a right to know what actually happened. The government did not see it that way. They did not. I became public enemy number one. Me and Osama bin Laden were essentially right up there in the same category. I was almost categorized as an enemy non-combatant. And here I had devoted my life to working against violence. On the morning of my arrest, when the feds snuck up on my house, when they were standing on my porch demanding to come into my house, they said, open the door, and I had barricaded the front door because my house, the front door of my house had mysteriously broken 3 weeks before. As I had suspected for some time and had been telling friends, I was in fact subjected to several warrantless searches. It used to be, before the Patriot Act, that a grand jury would only be convened if you actually had evidence of a crime. They wouldn't waste their time unless there was some proof that you actually did something wrong. Nowadays, under the Patriot Act, if they want to get you, they convene the grand jury first, and then they begin looking for something to hang you with. And of course, any law professor will tell you that if you look hard enough somewhere, you're going to find something against somebody. That you can always build a case against somebody in some way. And apparently in the Southern District of New York, they have a little game that they play where they throw out names of famous people, like Mother Teresa, or I guess Susan Lindauer, and say, how can we hang this person? How could we find a crime to throw at this person and get them thrown in jail? And they sit around and drink beer and pizza and talk about how they can screw ordinary Americans. And that's what they did to me. But the Patriot Act, so they couldn't open the door. And I said, well, they said, well, if you don't open the door, we're going to break it down. I said, you already broke it. You're going to break it again? And they did not think that was funny. And when they came in through a side door and they told me that I was attacking me, I had asked to testify. I have see, the beauty of the Patriot Act is that they have phone records of everything. They had captured 28,000 phone records, 8,000 emails, hundreds of faxes that I'd sent to members of Congress before the Iraqi war, telling members of Congress, under no circumstances should you go into Iraq. There will be no weapons of mass destruction. There's a peace option on the table, people. We can solve every problem that you have identified without firing a shot. Every single item on the agenda was resolvable. Iraq agreed to sorry, I'm in a church. I'm going to try to hold my swearing down. I do have a problem with that. I really do. And if I swear, I apologize. But it really makes me angry. The Patriot Act is 7,000 pages, as most of you know, that was passed, that was pulled out of a drawer after 9/11, mysteriously intact. Okay? It was already made. And it mirrors thousands of pages, mirror the Soviet criminal code that established the KGB, the Soviet Gulag system under Joseph Stalin. Okay? Neighbors are, it allows things that you can't even imagine in the United States of America. Secret charges, secret evidence, secret grand jury testimony. By that I mean, we were never, I had two attorneys. One, the first was a public defender because I couldn't afford a $200,000 defense or $300,000 defense. This was going to be astronomical, so I had to have a public defender. He didn't know what to do. And he had a very low-level aptitude. He had a very not a low-level aptitude. He had a standard aptitude. He just had no specialty. He had no capability to do this case. My second attorney was, after prison, was named Brian Shaughnessy, and a superior attorney, one of the best. He's done many CIA cases. He's a former federal prosecutor. He had a top secret security clearance for most of his career. He worked in the court of Judge John Sirica. You remember John Sirica, who did Watergate? Brian Shaughnessy was the top prosecutor assigned to Judge Sirica's court. Neither one of these individuals, the low-level public defender or the supreme high-flying attorney who helped to overturn the sentencing guidelines. If any of you are from Harvard Law, you'll know how the sentencing guidelines were overturned. Brian Shaughnessy helped to do that. Neither one of these attorneys, the best of the best of the best, was ever allowed to know what I was accused of doing. They were never allowed to see the evidence that a crime even occurred. They were not allowed to know what the crime consisted of. What activity was it? What did this woman do? Oh, we can't tell you that. Oh, no, we can't tell you that. We do know that, because I know what I was doing in that time period, that I was possibly accused of receiving a book on depleted uranium and cancer rates in Iraqi children. And this book would have exposed, I suppose, the threats to American soldiers from long-term exposure to this hideous depleted uranium, which has caused grotesque defects in Baghdad. And because they had a health security risk, because we can't really tell our soldiers what we're doing to them, this was considered a classified item. But I should go to prison for 5 years because I got a book? Wouldn't you think if there was if you were on a jury and you heard that there was a classified evidence against someone, wouldn't you presume it was like something really big? Something really, she must have done something really, really, really bad. No. Because they can exaggerate, they can falsify, they use the secret evidence to hide the paucity of evidence against you. They make it, it casts this big shadow over this, it's like one tiny little thing that creates this huge shadow across the room. And the other thing was that the other secret charge, we believe, was that the Iraqi government wanted to give the Bush administration the Bush campaign, not the Bush administration, the Bush campaign in the first election, several $100,000 in campaign contributions, which I immediately reported to my defense intelligence handler and stopped from happening. In other words, the Iraqis wanted to do it. I immediately reported it to the CIA and Defense Intelligence, and we stopped the crime from occurring because it would have been catastrophic to our efforts to get the weapons inspectors back into Iraq. My Defense Intelligence handler told me that if they ever gave money to the Bush administration, they would have no choice but to bomb them into the Stone Age. There would be no way of ever getting the sanctions off. So I was the one designated to stop that from happening, and they arrested me for it.